spending time together as a couple, not just a mom and dad, not just a business partner, but we're intentional about our date nights. Welcome to the On Purpose Investor Podcast with your host, Eric and Tiffany Vogel. We spent several hard years building a rental property portfolio so we could have more time with our family and live our ideal life. Finding your path can be difficult, so we're here to help guide you along the way with lessons, tips, and tricks to design and implement your dream life through real estate investing. Now sit back, turn up the volume, and get ready for this episode of the On Purpose Investor. Welcome back, Pathfinders, to the On Purpose Investor Podcast with your host, Eric.
And Tiffany.
So great to have you back this week with us. Today, we're going to get into something a little touchy. Could be sensitive, but hopefully by the end of this episode, you're left with some tools in your toolbox that will help and guide you along the way. And today, we're talking about how to work with your spouse and not kill your marriage. Working with your spouse can be difficult sometimes. It can require some delicate attention, requires introspection. It could be tough, but we're going to walk through some things today to help you either repair things that might be broken, create a plan moving forward, working with your spouse, or maybe deciding that you don't need to work with your spouse. Whatever the outcome may be, the goal is that you've put some tools in your tool bag. But before we get started, I kind of want to hit on something that was recent for us in working with your spouse. And that happened when I was trying to wrap up a rental that we're getting listed soon. And there's always those finishing touches that have to happen. And you don't necessarily want to call a contractor out to come tidy up a few little things when you can do them real quick, 15, 30-minute things. What could be a 15, 30-minute event often can turn into a hour-long production when your family arrives.
Well, what happened was we decided we were going to go grab some dinner and run by the store after you did just a couple small things. And my plan was to take the baby to the park that's around the corner and let him get on the swing and go crazy and wear himself out. But you were going so quick with everything. I was like, well, I mean, he can just kind of run around the house. He'll be fine. It's clean. Like there's not nails everywhere, just a few screws here and there. But I let him run around while you were installing a toilet. And then he's on a dad kick and he needed to be with his dad.
He wants to do everything I do, which I don't hate that. I love it. But when, I need to get behind a toilet and put some nuts and bolts together, I don't need a toddler crawling up the backside of me, putting his hand down the toilet to see what might be hiding down there.
So our little guy decides he needs to get in the tub. And it's an old cast iron tub that was reglazed. And
I had my tools in the tub so that they would be out of reach of our child.
But he climbed right over. He's a quick little booger. And it was low enough that he could throw his little legs around. And so he climbs in there and he starts pulling out all the different tools. So sitting with him and we're checking to see how level Dad's butt is and all kinds of fun things with the toolbox.
It's not that level if you're wondering.
And I stepped aside for just a second, and all of a sudden the stinker turned on the tub. And it's a weird tub, so I didn't know how to turn it off. So then I'm just like scrambling. Eric just grabs his toolbox, moves it out of the way, and we decide to go throw him in a box so he can play around with that and get out of Dad's way.
Right. And this is just one small example of working with your spouse and working with your family and the family business. How do you balance that? How do you make sure that little toddlers don't invade your space? Before we dive into that, we're going to give some disclaimers about this episode. We're going to be talking primarily about husband-wife teams or husband-husband, wife-wife teams. However you're working with your spouse.
Or significant other.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a significant other. You can replace most of the things we're going to talk about with business partner. How to make sure you have a healthy relationship with a business partner or your spouse to make sure you are aligned and you're not stepping on each other's. And as we're describing some examples throughout the show, we're not perfect. It's a work in progress. It's like the Constitution. It's a living document. When they first drafted the first Constitution, it wasn't perfect, and we've had amendments along the way. And you need to think about your relationship with your spouse or a business partner throughout, that it's a living, breathing relationship that needs work here and there, and you might have to make changes along the way.
Yeah, and different times you have to do different things. I know for us, we were focusing heavy in the rentals, we were very hands-on. We had our business set up in a certain way, and now our business is transformed where we're doing less work, except for when you have to do the punch-out things that you should be hiring out. And building this podcast and our book and things like that, we have had to shift the way we work together. And having a kid thrown in the mix definitely changes things.
Yeah, the document in itself changed.
Yeah.
Our relationship as business partners changed.
Right.
So the first thing we're going to dive into are the different hats we wear as husband, wife, as business partners.
Yeah. I've heard of people physically putting on a different hat as they're changing roles. We've never done that.
I do have enough hats for that.
You do. Excessive. But anyways, we try to be very clear about what role we're in at different times of the day. So, for example, our son's at school right now. So right now we have on our business hats. When we go pick him up, the parent hat comes on. When he goes to bed, the spouse hat comes on. And obviously we still have the spouse hat on the entire time, or we still have it available, I guess.
That's
but
right.
We try to define our roles based off of the situation. So we'll have conversations as business partners that are a little bit different than we would have as conversation as a spouse.
Yeah, and oftentimes within a hat are some sub hats.
Right.
So like our business hats, I would think more of a sombrero.
Oh my God.
And under this big sombrero are little hats, like little ornaments hanging on the sombrero around there. Isn't that awesome?
Wow.
That could actually be on our products page
Oh my
one day.
God.
We have our delayed gratification Care Bear. Now we have our sombrero with many hats.
Yes.
But under that sombrero are the many different business hats that you wear. My sombrero has general contractor, quote unquote I'm not a general contractor, but I manage contractors on our rentals, on our different projects. But I also wear the hat of being an author in our business. I wear the hat of producing these podcasts. I wear the hat of making sure the podcasts are getting sent out to get produced. So I wear the production hat. Other business hats that I wear, what are they? What else do I do in the business?
A lot of things. It's at the end of the day, you have many roles within the business.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to designate times for those roles. So one of the big things that we have done is have really clear working hours. And we try to time block so that we're focused on a particular business or particular role at different times of the day.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have more bandwidth in the morning, so I try to do my blog posts and my really heavy thinking stuff. We do our podcast in the morning usually, so that I am really on it. And then I do my more task work in the afternoon for the rentals, for our on-purpose investor, everything else.
Now, what that takes is some introspection of knowing when you were most productive.
Right.
Not everyone's most productive in the morning.
No, you're not.
I'm
by no
quite
means.
unproductive in the morning.
Yeah.
I just want my coffee and shove oatmeal in our son's face. I am good on that mindless, numbing task of just playing oatmeal without it. So that I am quite in tune with where my productivity is. My
Right.
productivity is at a different time of the day. So my dad hat is worn when your business hat is worn.
Right. And you a lot of times will come and work after I go to bed because I
Mhm.
get up early, so I go to bed early. So you'll a lot of times come out and work late at night and then you sleep in later. So we have this good balance. But I think the big thing is we have very defined working hours
Mhm.
where, and maybe it's not necessarily defined working hours, we have defined family hours
Yeah.
where pretty much 4 o'clock usually we're done for the day until our son goes to bed. And then if you have something urgent, you'll go start working at that point. But typically you'll wait till I go to bed and then you have that time to work if you want.
Yeah. And we share family/business time throughout the day where I'll take Otto while you work on stuff here. You'll take him when I work on stuff
Right.
there. And it's what makes it work is that we put it on the calendar.
Yes.
We make sure that whatever's on the calendar for that day is the way the day needs to go. Now, of course, things may come up and have to adjust fire, but for the most part, we try to really stick to the calendar. It helps me, it helps Tiffany to plan out, oh, I have an hour and a half to focus on this task, so I need to be productive within that hour and a half. And it's within my productive hours.
Right.
It just helps you to align where you're working, where you're putting your energy, how much time you have to do that. And it helps both sides of the table, the spouse or the business partner, to understand their responsibility within that task for the other person.
I think it also creates a lot of freedom. So you're able to schedule events with friends, whether for both of us or just yourself, because our calendar is our life. So what's going on, I know what's going on at any given time.
Right.
And we're able to schedule dinners or lunches or whatever we need to do without having to wait to consult each other. It just takes a lot of the time out of back and forth.
Having that clear set time where you're working.
Right.
Having clear hours of when you are accomplishing your tasks, whether they're family tasks, husband tasks, wife tasks,
right,
business tasks. It's very clear and laid out where your time is being spent, how much time is being spent there. And talking about these setting working hours, while you're working in those different tasks, what you're really doing is you're traveling down your lane. In business, whatever hat you're wearing, it's kind of like, you have your truck driver hat on and you're driving down the road and you are staying in your lane. You have a designated lane that you can travel in. And sometimes you have to switch lanes here and there. And switching lanes, essentially in business, is I'm focusing on this task with this hat on, and I need to move to this other task and switch lanes. Now, I have very designated lanes in our business. Tiffany doesn't come into my lane because she doesn't wear that hat.
Right. So what we're saying is we have clearly laid out what role in each business we each are responsible for. So in our rental property business, Eric manages the structure. So he's responsible for the house and maintenance and repairs and renovations when we first do the purchase. I handle pretty much everything in the email. If there's a phone call that has to be made, I hate talking to the tenants, so Eric handles that. So it's not necessarily like I handle all the tenant stuff, he handles all the structure stuff. We have different roles, but we have very clearly defined if a phone call comes through, he's going to take it. If it's an email, I'm going to handle it. So we have very clearly defined who's handling what. So there's no question. And this took time for us to figure out and sort through. But at this point, we know if something comes up, who's handling it. And if we don't, it's just a quick conversation and we can figure it out. But I think the thing that's really made us successful is when I'm going to go into Eric's lane to do something, I let him know. And I heard this on a podcast. I wish I could remember which one so I could give credit to it. But they talked about when this woman was crossing into her husband's lane, she thought of it like being on the interstate. She would turn on the turn signal and say, hey, I'm coming into your lane. Let's say I'm going to order the materials for this renovation. And she would order the materials. And then she would also turn off the signal and say, hey, I'm out of your lane. So she clearly communicated, I'm coming in, did the task, let him know it was done and that she was done in his lane. And that's really taken a lot of clarity for us so that I'm not questioning, is this something I need to do? Is it something Eric's going to do? We have very clearly defined, this is my job or that's his job.
Right. One thing that happened for us that made it aware that we needed to start signaling was my lane was I take the phone calls. I am the communications part of our rental business. You never know what people are going to say on the other end of the phone. And because I'm not the business decision maker when it comes to our, rental agreements, our rent prices, or anything like that, is Tiffany's lane. But sometimes because I am in the driver's seat of communication, but I don't necessarily have all of the information, I can sometimes be stuck in between two lanes and not really know which way to go. And we knew we had to clarify, how do we accomplish that task? So an example was I get a phone call from a prospective tenant and they're saying how they want to apply for the house and what is the rent on the house. And I had vaguely remembered a conversation between Tiffany and I about what we wanted to rent this house for. And I just mentioned that number to this prospective tenant. And let's say that it was $1,200 a month. Problem is that conversation I remembered having with Tiffany was for a different property, one that was rented for way less than what this potential property was going to be rented for. And I should have reverted back to saying, that's not my lane. You need to email to get more information about this. But instead, I just hijacked Tiffany's lane and started traveling down that. And luckily, we were able to avoid that situation. Somehow, maybe the tenant wasn't qualified. They couldn't rent the property. But that was a near crash. I almost crashed into Tiffany's lane and created a problem. But we had to create a system of saying, okay, I'm traveling down this lane and I'm going to be merging into yours in and out here and there, but I need to make sure that I'm being safe while doing it, that I either have my hazards on or something to avoid being in a crash situation.
Yeah, I think it all comes down to knowing your role. And it's something that evolved over time. We didn't start out this clearly defined. It was a lot of trial and error. And there were times you were gone for military duty, so I would take over things in your lane. And we realized there's a reason why you handle those things. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really given us an easier way to work together because we're not stepping on each other's toes often. It happens sometimes, but we're able to get over those quickly. And I think another key thing is having a big differentiation between our business roles and our spouse roles.
So if your business roles are not clearly defined and you're having these battles with your business partner or spouse, it creates tension. And tension is never a good thing, especially when, you're in the house working with your spouse and you don't get to leave the job.
Right. I mean, in a traditional work environment, you work your 8-10 hours, whatever it is, and then you go home and you get away from those coworkers that are driving you crazy. And there have been days that we get into an argument as business partners where we disagree on something or something happens. And at the end of the day, we still have to sleep next to each other. So we try to alleviate a lot of that with these lanes and doing some other things in our marriage to differentiate between work and spousal hats to make it easier, because you can't get away from your coworker when it's your spouse.
And you're not always going to get along. We do not always agree. We often don't agree on things business-wise. I have a completely different view of how certain decisions are made. I'm a risk taker. I believe in biting off more than I can chew sometimes. I believe in taking those big risks. And a lot of my decisions are based off of how I think and how I live life. I'm a little haphazard at most times. And Tiffany's not. She's, what, you're reserved?
I think I contemplate more than you do. I think you're a ready, fire, aim kind of person.
Oh, ready, aim, fire. Oh,
no,
fire.
You don't aim.
Oh,
you just
okay.
go. And then you're like, I should probably... I think you see things that look fun and you don't always ponder how that's going to impact other areas of life. Like we were about to buy a parcel of land to build a house on. And we're also have a 14-month-old. We also have our 15 rentals. We also are building this podcast and the book and all these other things. And we have another property under renovation. Trying to do a new construction on an area that wasn't even really zoned right for what we were trying to do would have just been a lot more than I think we were ready to bite off at that point. But you were like ready to go. And
that created tension.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, it was rejection. And I've talked about this on past episodes that I fear rejection. I don't like it. But I have to wear this business hat and understand there's going to be criticism and understand that not everyone, especially my business partner and wife, is going to agree with the things that I want to do. And I've got to be able to take that criticism underneath that business hat and take it off at the end of the day and put on the husband and dad hat and not bring that business into our relationship. So how do you avoid the pitfall of bringing the business tension, not back home with you, but into the same room? You're essentially going to be sitting in your office or sitting wherever your office is. It might be the couch, and you're not really going to be able to leave and go home to change hats or whatnot. So how do you change hats but not bring home the tension?
Key to that is taking time for yourself.
Yeah.
And date nights. I think those two things go hand in hand. I like to get up early. Sometimes I don't feel like getting up early, but I know if I get up an hour or so before our son's up, that gives me time to just gradually wake up, enjoy my coffee. I can read, I can meditate, pray, whatever I want to do that morning. And sometimes I even get some work done while I'm waiting for him to wake up. And that gives me the space for myself to just start my day in a way that works really well for me. It gives you time to sleep in, and it's just, I don't know, it's a good working model for us right now.
Well, and I sleep in because I stay up late. That is my time. So when Tiffany goes to bed at 8:30.
Hey now.
I come out to our studio. If you're not familiar, we have a little barn behind our house that I built out. You could see a little bit about this barn on my TikTok.
We'll post a YouTube video we'll do it MTV Crib style. You'll get to see the euphonium and all the fun things that are out here.
But yes, so I come out here when Tiffany goes to bed and I do my thing. I take time I don't always come out here to work. This is kind of like a safe little environment for me to be away. I've created that environment that I need personally. I need to feel like I am away from home at times. And this is a place where I can do that. And sometimes I need even more space. Sometimes I need to be around other people. And I get that fix most of the time when I go do military duty. When I have drill, I get to go up to the base and work my military job, but I also get to be around different people. And me, I'm a social person. I really get my kicks by spending time with other people. And that's what fuels me to bring more energy home, is being able to have that outlet to experience things with other people.
Well, and those weekends are great for me because I'm definitely more of an introvert. And I don't know why, but it seems like every time you have military duty, our son's teething or sick or constipated or pick your poison. But after he goes to bed, I have my alone time to recharge. And I don't make tons of plans. I can't make plans for the evenings because I have to be home with him while he sleeps. So that gives me my ability to recharge and just take a break from the constant go pace that our life can sometimes get. That works really well for us. I don't know that it's easily replicated for others, and maybe some business travel or just mixing things up a little bit to give yourself some space.
The most important part of that is doing something for yourself.
Right.
Self-care is something that when you're climbing a corporate ladder or you're in this rat race of your job, taking time for yourself might seem like the most unimportant thing that you could do because you're not being productive. If you could focus on you a little bit, you're going to give an output so much greater than if you don't take time for you. If you're not performing at peak performance, because with self-care, you're able to change the oil in your body, essentially. If you're running on 100,000 miles of unchanged oil, that engine's going to stop up. But if you take time to self-care, change the oil, do the maintenance, change the air filter, you're going to run a lot better. And that's something that we have been a little more intentional about recently, is doing that self-care and having time for ourselves.
I think in addition to that is also the self-care for the marriage and the relationship through date nights.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always happen, but we shoot for once a week that we're going out. We're about to kick off a new small group with church, and we have a babysitter while we go do that. So that gives us some time as a couple and not as business partners to be around people and learn and have a good community opportunity. But we also do just date nights, just us, where we usually go out to dinner.
Well, and sometimes it's hard to find a babysitter at times, or Otto's sick and we don't really want to leave a sick kid with a babysitter. So what we'll do is we have to be creative. We'll put him to bed and then we'll do date night at home with him napping. We'll do something unique, set up a table outside with a candle or something, or create
cook some nice steaks,
cook a nice dinner, just something out of the ordinary that makes it feel special, and putting the phones away, putting everything, all the distractions away, and just really harnessing back in on our marriage and our relationship.
And the big thing is we try to put up roadblocks where we don't talk about work. And
it's hard to do.
It's very hard. And we're both guilty of it.
Most every conversation is, what are we doing tomorrow? When most married couples talk, it's, hey, what'd you do at work today?
Right. But you're not at work with your spouse. So
right. So you get to talk about Roy at the fire department is picking on me and was just challenging me, and I just don't like old Roy. Pick a different situation, but there's always that one person at work that you like to gossip about. There's always that one person at work that is a go-getter and you're very proud of them.
Right, but talking about your tenants and the one that's a pain in the butt is not.
No, that's stress.
It is.
That's something that I don't enjoy talking about, because that's like, I've got to find a solution and I've got to get to it.
Right.
And I don't want to do that.
Right. This is time to rest and relax and not be talking about work. And it's tough because when you're in a traditional work situation where you're not working with your spouse, talking about your day is how it goes. But when you work 50 to 75% of the day with your spouse, there's not a whole lot to talk about when it comes to your day.
So what do we talk about? Often we'll talk about, where are we going on our next camping trip? What are we going to do? And
a lot of times we play Jeopardy on Alexa.
Yeah, I mean,
We
and
enjoy
that's a
that.
great way to brain tease a little bit
Yeah.
and I don't know, just remove yourself from what the day was, what the week has been, or whatnot. I don't know. It's important to just try to remove yourself from talking business.
Right. And we talk about extended family and what's going on with them and trying to talk about who we should try to get dinner with in the next week or two. It's a challenge. You can definitely Google things to talk about with your spouse. And there's table topics or these little cards you can get and they just have a prompt. I remember I did a public speaking class and one of the prompts was what's your favorite side at Thanksgiving?
Oh boy.
Yeah, that was close to my heart.
Well, mine is dressing.
I said all of them and I gave a speech on how they're all important.
The best Thanksgiving side is absolutely dressing.
Not stuffing?
Oh my gosh. It's only stuffing if you cooked it inside the bird.
Okay. Let's not get into that argument again.
So date nights are important because it practices self-care for your relationship.
Yeah.
It allows you to focus back in on your marriage, on your relationship. And let's say you're listening and this is just applicable to your business partner. Do a business dinner. Go to a business dinner and just talk about each other's families.
Well, and maybe bring the families in.
Yeah, build relationships there and get to know your business partner better. We've had several different business partners over the years. And
we love getting together as a family, especially because we work together. A lot of them don't work with their spouse. So it's nice to see that other side of them.
That's right. That's right.
I think another big thing that's really helped us in the business side of things is we run our business like a business, not like a family business. We run it like a corporation. And I think my 10 years in corporate America helped create that structure. So we have weekly meetings where we sit down and just kind of run through almost like a weekly meeting and a team meeting. We run through the numbers, anything we need to cover there. And sometimes we'll include personal finances in that, just so we're both on the same page on our spending. But it's just an opportunity for us to sit down and talk through some of the tactical things for the week, make sure we're working on the right things to further the goal of the entire business. Instead of just focusing on our one lane, we get to look at the big picture.
If you can't tell by the way Tiffany's talking, she is absolutely the driver of that lane and wears that hat. I am not an organized person. I am not put together. And Tiffany, thank God, has brought some organization into my life. But the way we run this business, she wears that hat of structuring these business meetings and making sure financials are up to date and put in the way they need to be put in. She wears those hats. But what I bring to the table, what my part of the business meetings is, forecasting what's coming next, how are we going to do all these things simultaneously, building out a Gantt chart essentially for our life. So that's what I bring to the table. You and your spouse or you and your business partner, you both bring something to the table. You both have a unique skill set and put those to practice and run your business like a business. Don't run it like a hobby. Because if you treat your business with your spouse or your business partner like a hobby, it's not going to go far.
You're going to get the results of a hobby, not of a business.
That's right.
And a lot of times we will use that time to review our goals and make sure that we're focusing on the right things. And I'm actually planning to work on a blog post, which will probably be out by the time this is released, on goal setting and breaking it down into chunks that are bite-sized. And you should be reviewing your goals every week to make sure that you're doing the right thing that week to reach your goal for the year.
Right.
Also, there's a big component of understanding who you are and your spouse. And we've touched on this before, but we are big on personality profiles because it helps you it doesn't put you in a box, but it gives you some clarity on why you respond to things the way you do. And we're big proponents of the Enneagram. We've talked about it a few times.
And your Enneagram number?
I'm a 1, perfectionist.
And I'm a number 9, referee. I'm a peacemaker. And
we've learned how to leverage these personality types in our business. So Eric doesn't touch the email very often because he's terrible at responding to emails.
Yeah, I'm not a organized person.
Right.
I do not focus on results that are analytical driven.
Right. But with the people, he's great. So that's why Eric talks to the tenants on the phone. There are times we have a Google Voice account we use for our rentals. And there are times I will text a tenant and get like the worst response. And then Eric says the same thing with his silver tongue through text. And all of a sudden the tenant's like on board and ready to kiss his feet.
And it doesn't have anything to do that Tiffany's bad at communicating. It's just she has a different style of communicating. She's results focused. And can you speak to that a little
Yeah,
bit?
I mean, I am very black and white. The contract is the contract, and we should all do what we said we would do. And Eric's very
Yeah.
he's very empathetic and able to put himself in that person's shoes and understand what they're going through. And it has benefited us so many times because we're able to work with our tenants to collect past due rent and things. So even with COVID, we only had one property that we broke even on. Every other property, we had pretty significant profits. And I think a lot of that was because Eric was able to communicate with our tenants in a way that we were able to at least collect some rent from them.
And it's creating a common bond of understanding. We're not going to get into that. My motto is you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar.
And I just don't understand why people can't follow the rules. But
There
that
we go.
comes down to our personality types.
Right. So one thing that the Enneagram also does is it does compatibility matches. You can pair any number together.
But it shows how you work together.
Right. It'll say a 9 and a 1, when they are together, here are the different pitfalls, here are the different things that are great, and here's how to navigate that relationship. And while it won't tell you exactly, it's not a manual on having the perfect relationship with that other number profile, but it is a guide. It says when you say something, they're going to hear it like this.
Right. I think it just gives us words to use, and it's almost like a new language to help us communicate. And I think working with your spouse, it can be such a struggle. And for us, we started working together pretty much as soon as we started dating. Maybe a couple months, not even 6 months.
Well, we bought houses before we got married.
Right.
Together,
so we've had to navigate this from the beginning. And I think we kind of had a wake-up call at one point. It was, we don't really have a relationship. We're just kind of business partners.
Our marriage sucks. What marriage?
Right.
And we said, all right, the number one thing between us is us being partners in marriage.
Right.
It's not us having rentals. It's not us
we did all of
making
that.
money.
We did all of the rentals in the business for our future and our family. And I think that's one of the big benefits of working with your spouse is at the end of the day, you have a shared vision. Sometimes when you have a business partner, you might not want the same thing. Your business partner might want to grow a massive company with 50 employees, but you want to keep something small to keep your time freedom. And with us, we were very clear on our shared vision for our business and our family. So we have the same goals, and we focus on winning for our family first, and the business comes after that. But the business is a tool for us to reach our goals for our family.
Yeah. Another benefit of working with your spouse and doing it intentionally. So not just intentionally, being very intentional about how you work with your spouse. It strengthens your marriage and it drives compatibility, because there's no better way to reveal your weaknesses than having it all on display as a working partner with your spouse when you fail. Because when you fail at work, you have a boss to answer to. You answer to your boss, and sometimes you can hide those failures at work because, it's a work thing.
Well, and you're not going to come home and tell your spouse how much you messed up.
Yeah, I sucked today. You're not going to come home and say, I sucked today. You're going to talk about what little wins you had, or you're going to say, it was work. But when you fail in front of your spouse, you're being very vulnerable. When I drop the ball and don't call someone back that I was supposed to call back for 2 weeks, that reveals something very vulnerable about me, that it might tell the story that I'm unreliable, that I'm untrustworthy. It reveals so much. But what that can also do on the other side is drive your relationship to be better.
I feel like our marriage has been like a diamond in the coal, and the pressure of the business and all the tension of what we've built has created this diamond. So we've gone through a lot of struggles, but I think our marriage is stronger than it ever would have been if we continued just working our W-2s and having those separate life.
I completely agree.
Yeah. I think too, like working with your spouse, you work together well and you're compatible in some ways, because you wouldn't marry someone if you weren't somewhat compatible. So
you would hope not.
My weaknesses are Eric's strengths and vice versa. So it's worked very well where I don't enjoy talking to people because my words are very blunt and harsh at times, and I can offend people very easily. And my intentions in my heart is not to be offensive, but it can come across that way. And even in our marriage, that comes up. So I don't talk to people. We let Eric handle that. And if I'm sending an email, he has to proof it before it goes out. But that compatibility between us gives me a very strong business partner who has the strengths that I need and I'm lacking, and vice versa for Eric.
Yeah.
And we trust each other. I mean, there's no business partner I would trust any more than my husband.
You would hope that anyone could say that,
Yeah.
right?
Right. I mean, he could stab me in the middle of the night if he wanted to. So there's a level of trust that comes with the spouse that it makes it easier in some ways to run the business.
Yeah, so to recap what we've talked about today, working with your spouse. How does Tiffany work with me without our marriage being murdered?
Right.
Essentially. So we have designated hats that we wear. We travel in designated lanes. My sombrero has many little hats, and I drive a different little car with each one of those little hats.
That's hilarious.
We set very intentional working hours versus family versus personal hours. We make sure we have a date night, whether that's a stay-at-home date night or that's a going out date night, but we make sure that we are intentional about spending time together as a couple, not just a mom and dad, not just a business partner, but we're intentional about our date nights. We're intentional about taking time for ourselves, making sure you have time for self-care. We run our business like a business. Make sure that whatever business you're running with your partner or your spouse, that it is run like a business and not a hobby. Getting to know yourself a little bit better through the Enneagram or whatever personality tool identifier that you want to use. And then being open to this relationship being strengthened by all of these things and being willing to put in the hard work, letting that coal being pressurized into something beautiful like a diamond.
All right. Thank you all for hanging out with us and listening to us talk about working with your spouse and how to not let it kill your marriage. How can you make the time you spent with us worthwhile? Is it defining lanes in your business, setting clear working hours, understanding your business partner or spouse through the Enneagram or other personality profile tools, or something else? Don't let the time you just invested go to waste. You only get one life, so live it purposefully. That's all we have for you today. See you next time.
Are you ready to discover and build your dream life? Then it's time to become a Pathfinder. Head over to onpurposeinvestor.com and sign up for our newsletter to get tips and tricks to help you find your path and get the latest from our blog. If you haven't already, we'd really appreciate an honest review on your favorite podcast app. If you're enjoying this show, share it with friends, family, and fellow investors. See you next time at the On Purpose Investor Podcast.